So this time we'll see what it takes to start this old 3rd generation Prelude that had compression issues and then sat for years before I got a hold of it. I got it from a young military guy who bought it as his first car and loved it, but he didn't have time to make it what it needed to be, which was a fun, reliable car for when he wasn't away from home. And spoiler alert, failure is totally expected on this one. So I'm gonna get to it. Now there's some cars you come across that even though they've been sitting or neglected for years, you can tell that they could still be great even after all this time. Maybe it has a nice paint job under all the mildew, or maybe it was tastefully modified before the mold started to grow, or it was just preserved as a nice stock example from the factory. Or you look at the dash and they're really low mileage. Well, this car is none of those things. This was a car that, though it was painted, they didn't even take the time to mask it properly and just painted over everything. And the only custom work was this spoiler that doesn't belong on this car at all, and a leather shift boot with some blue stitching, which I guess is fine. And though yes, it's a stock example, it's far from nice. Aside from still having this rare clock cover and a decent interior, there was no care or consideration when replacing any damaged parts before the respray. So why did I buy this car? The same reason a lot of us buy things we shouldn't. Nostalgia. And the fact that it was only $200 and I didn't have to drive far to get it helped as well. You see, my first car ever was a white 1990 Honda Prelude SI, 4-wheel steering. And I love that car. The first time that I saw it, the first time that I rode in it, I knew that I wanted to have that car. And I actually ended up getting the one that I had seen and rode in first. And it was the car that I learned most of what I know mechanically, because I spent more time fixing it than driving it. And now that's not really the car's fault. That's a bit more because I was young and had absolutely no mechanical skills necessary to keep an old car like that going. And when I look back, this is the platform that I blame my current addiction to the art of buying crap cars to work on. And what better way to honor that than to buy a crummy example of my first car, and using what I've learned since then and learning some new things along the way, bring you guys along and make this one good again. And our only goal is just to try and start it. So the first obvious thing to do was get a battery with some life in it. I was already prepared with the battery on a slow charge days ago. Hopefully the old discharge battery would hold its own long enough to find the problems keeping this engine from running right. But with only 12.2 volts out of the usual or necessary 12.6, we'll see if this battery even cuts it. And the next two things on the list to check is going to be oil and coolant. Well, unfortunately, I'd rather have the wrong oil in it than none at all. The engine won't run long with it, so what can you do? Now I should have just used water instead of adding the antifreeze to it, but I had a little bit of overconfidence that the problem with the car starting would be pretty minor and it wouldn't take any kind of disassembly to get going again. So let's set that belt aside for later use, as this power steering pump is seized and needs replacing. And the rest of the belts and hoses seem to be doing their jobs, so it's finally time to connect the battery, check the clutch operation, and start it. And so it begins, the hopeless determination that this thing would start and actually run today. Well, realistically, I knew there could be a problem with getting fuel to the engine. So some starting fluid will get it started, and a new fuel pump will be the next step. So after many attempts to make it roar to life, all I managed were just a few short whimpers. And then I noticed there was actually no check engine light on the dash at all. So with a possible communication error between the ECU and engine, it was time to accept defeat. I decided I'd wait until the next day to start again, and that'll be next time on Dead Pedal Garage.